We are back for another episode of the Capes and Tights podcast right here at capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg, once again. This week, we talked to Alex and Rich of Breath of Shadows, a comic book over at IDW Publishing. This is their third book they've come out with over at IDW. We talked about this book, Breath of Shadows, as well as Road of Bones and Sea of Sorrows a bit. So check this episode out. But before we get started, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter, as well as like, share, rate, review, all those things on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. 5 stars, please. And as always, visit capesandtights.com for a wide variety of coverage and more. This is Rich and Alex of Breath of Shadows over at IDW. Enjoy, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, well, got my coffee here. Yeah.
Good deal.
It was funny. It's a gift from someone. I used to run a bar, and someone in the bar like, "Oh, you're a comic book fan?" And they gave me this Kylo Ren mug, so I had to use this Star Wars mug.
That's a guarantee. Your coffee has to be black from now on.
It's actually cold right now, so black and cold. There you go.
Cold and black, just like the Empire.
Nice.
Well, welcome to the show. We're going to talk some comic books here, but I mean, I always like to get started talking to the guests about their kind of origin stories in comic books. So either one of you wants to go first, but like just if you want to talk about like how you started reading or collecting, and then how that transitioned into working in the industry.
Sure. Yeah.
Rich, hit it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I read comics a lot. Like when I was a kid, you know, it was like kind of like my one of my favorite things was it was like I remember going out on like Saturdays or Sundays, like with the family, like go shopping, and then like kind of my reward for not causing a ruckus while we were shopping was get to buy some comics in the store. So that was like a weekly thing. So that's how I kind of got into, you know, your classic comics like, you know, X-Men and Batman and stuff like that. And then like anything else, I just sort of like, you know, fell off it for a little bit. But then when I was in college, I started wandering into comic stores and seeing like a lot of the kind of you know, more mature stuff, like, and I don't mean mature like adult, I mean stuff like Sandman and Transmetropolitan, The Invisibles, like, you know, kind of like all the old Vertigo stuff, and just, you know, like comics that weren't like, you know, superhero stuff, and it kind of like blew my mind a little bit, because like I knew it's like the difference between like, you know, knowing that like, oh yeah, not every comic is like a superhero comic, and then like seeing like a whole bunch and learning that they're like, oh, they're really good, and something I really enjoyed. So I started reading a lot more of those, and I had always like wanted to write, but I never. It's like funny because I always thought like, oh, I'm gonna write like a novel, or I'm gonna write like, you know, a fantasy series or something like that, or science fiction. So I kept trying to do that and kept kind of banging my head against the wall, because writing a novel is like an insane amount of work, and you know, I haven't tried to tackle it in a while, but I know that like when I was at that point in life, I just wasn't like down to like do all that. I would like run out of steam at like, you know, chapter 7 or something like that, and then sort of put it away. And then like the more I was reading these comics, the more I was thinking like, you know, a lot of the stuff that I want to do in these like ideas I have for novels, like I could do them as comics. I just have to kind of learn how to write a script and try that. So I just started learning that, and I started really small with just like, I was just like, I'm just going to do a 5-page story and pay for it, because, you know, it's not cheap. And I was like, that'll like kind of tell me if I'm onto something or not. And I was like, and at the end of the day, like if it sucks, I don't ever have to do it again. I could just sort of like, you know, put it in a drawer and not have to worry about it. But it turned out that it was a really good experience. The art, you know, the art started coming in. It was a great feeling, kind of seeing the script come to life. And I showed it to a few friends, and they all liked it. So I did another 5-pager and another, and then just started, kind of branching out and doing more and more. Started going to comic conventions, meeting people, and then just kind of got into the scene, and here we are a few years later.
And for you, Alex?
Yeah, so my whole origin story, it really started with like the comics in the paper.
Mhm.
Like my dad would always get the paper, and especially the Sunday edition, all that. And so for me, my earliest heroes for artists really were like Jim Davis, like Gary Larson, Bill Watterson, all those guys. And that's what I wanted to do when I was a kid. I was like, I want to do some like comic strips in the paper. And but as it turned out, I'm not that funny. So I'm like, all right, well, it's fun to draw this stuff, but at the same time, I was also kind of getting into comics because my older brother, he's 5 years older, and he was crazy about comics. And whatever he kind of left on the floor, like I would come in and like kind of pick up and be like, all right, what's this book and all that. And at the same time, he was like, oh, come here, I gotta show you. Look, this is Craven's Last Hunt. Just check this out. Look what he's doing here. And like, oh my god, he shot Spider-Man. I'm like, what? Like, and like, oh, this is the X-Men. Let me tell you all about the X-Men. This guy is Logan. He's Wolverine. He's got knives in his hands, and he can't be hurt. And I'm like, oh, this is the greatest. And and like I loved comics when I was a kid. Like and it was the same deal. Like we would go to a little shop, and like they had like a spinner rack, and it was just like pick up Batman or X-Men or Spider-Man or whatever looked cool, I would grab. And so like all through the 90s through like Nightfall and like 0 Hour and all that junk from DC and like loved all that stuff. But then the same deal, I kind of got out of it, and then and I got into more like cartooning and like animation, and I tried that for a while, but it wasn't really clicking. But at the same time, I started getting back into comics, and especially like when the movie Sin City came out.
Mhm.
That was kind of like oh yeah, I remember like seeing these ads. I never actually sat down and read this book, but like because I never like there wasn't really, if there was a comic book shop, like specific comic book shop around, I didn't really know about it. I mean, it's just you only got them with like the newspapers, and they weren't really specifically carrying Sin City. So but I remember like finding a copy of that. Actually, no, I got the DVD, and the deluxe DVD came with the first issue of, or like the Hard Goodbye, right? The
Mhm.
first run. And I remember being like, oh my god, this is great. I love it, all stuff. And then my brother told me about this book Invincible, and I'm like, all right, what's this about and all stuff. And I skipped ahead a bunch of issues, and I saw like so won't get to it, but like some dude like shoving his arm through another dude with guts like puking out the back. And I was like, this is where it's at. This is, I mean, that's what I want to be doing. This looks like you could do this. Like, because in my mind, like before I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, Wolverine's got claws, but he doesn't actually cut anybody. Like it's always, you're kind of like, and they're like, they're fine, but I saw this, I'm like, oh my, there's the spleen is floating away or whatever. And I'm like, all right, this could be fun. And but it all started, I got into business because Jim Zub was doing a book, Skull Kickers, and for Image, and they were doing this like an event at Larry's Comics, which used to be in Lowell, Massachusetts, and they were looking for like artwork. And my brother again was like, hey, you should do some artwork, because at this point I was trying animation, nothing was clicking. It was a lot of pay to play stuff, and so I was like trying to figure out what am I going to do with my career. So he mentions this. I draw a picture, bring it up there, and just like, hi, how are you? I could draw. Here, I drew this for you. There you go. and but then what happened was it was like a competition, and I didn't know that, and I won. And it was like one of these things like you see in the back of an issue, like like winner of this, and it's like a big page spread of this drawing I did. So once I saw that, then I was going around and be like, oh, well, I'm an Image published artist, and that got me a job with our friend Enrica Jang, who does Red Style Media, and I did a couple stories in anthology with her called Poe Twisted, And that evolved into getting a job with my buddy Brian Phillipson with Bliss on Tap, doing a book called Future Proof, and that evolved into this, doing that, and this, and then going to conventions and all this, and how we met was it also evolved into getting jobs with a company called Comics Tribe, where I did a cover for their book, The Red 10, and with their character Oxymoron, and then I did a story in the Oxymoron anthology they did and he basically Oxymoron, if you know, he's kind of like a supervillain obsessed with contradictions, and he goes around and hacks people up. And so I did an anthology with that, and then our friend John Lees and we did a mini series with Oxymoron. Then we did another mini series with Comics Tribe called Sync, and now you're caught up to where Rich and I started Roto Bones and so on and so forth. Because I mean, Rich and I would see each other at conventions and all this type of stuff. And we were friends just before we did anything because we kind of just ran with the same kind of group of guys and all that. And yeah, I'm rambling. I don't know.
You're good. So two things I want to think of. One is it's kind of funny how you mentioned the comic strips for the newspaper. It'd be pretty interesting to see your style of art nowadays in a newspaper with bugs crawling out of his eyes and things like that.
Right?
I mean,
well, you know, I did for CSROs, when we finished it, I did a style of like total like Jim Davis style of and like just for fun, like kind of like a capper of like we did it, and here's something just kind of like
I love that image. That was like honestly like one of my favorite things you've ever done. I just thought it was hilarious. It looked like CSROs, but like by way of Garfield. Like
yep. So yeah, they had like the big eyes and everything.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Larry's comic books in Lowell, Massachusetts. Are you from that area?
I'm from Mass. Yeah, I'm
okay.
Yeah.
Because
I'm from like
I lived in Lowell,
suburbs between like Boston and Worcester.
Okay, because I lived in Lowell in Massachusetts. I live in Maine now, but I lived in Lowell for like 10 years from like 2006 to 2016. And I have like I have a couple of comic. I mean, I've shopped at Larry's. I don't know what happened to Larry's. I know they're closed now, but I don't know if it was did they move? I figured something happened.
He moved to like last time I haven't talked to him forever. Yeah. He moved to Chelmsford.
Yeah.
And then he was like, and then he moved out of there, and after that, I moved away from the area because I used to live in Tingsboro, and now I live in Vermont.
Okay.
And and I just kind of like I don't know what he's doing. He's
it was weird. I heard like for a while he was doing something where like he had to close the shop, but he had a lot of like pull list customers that he still that he like known for years and didn't want to like kind of leave them high and dry, so he was kind of like still ordering their stuff and just like kind of like, almost like running it out of like a hotel room or something.
Yeah, I think he was doing like something like that. Sounds about
like right. He rented like just some space that wasn't like a comic shop, and I don't think it was like open to the public, but it was like if you were like a long time customer or whatever, you could go and get your comics.
Brings new meaning to your comics dealer.
Yeah, but like like Alex, I haven't talked to him in years. I just remember we Joe Mulvey and I did a signing up there many years ago.
I remember when I moved away, I think they ended up moving to like a shop that wasn't like they had to like do some repairs on or something like that. Is that correct? I feel like I went in there.
He had a shop in Lowell forever, and then they moved to a new spot in Chelmsford.
Yeah,
and I remember at the time I was psyched because it was like 5 minutes down the road.
Yeah,
from where I lived at the time, and but it was totally like a convenience store, right? Like he had the coolers in the back, and he took me around, and I just remember the basement looked like a freaking dungeon down there, like with the stone walls. It was just creepy. I'm like, I don't know. I probably shouldn't. Where's the exit? Just at all times,
so you know. But that's pretty funny because like I had this gap in years of collecting comics myself personally, that I had like big into Civil War and Secret Invasion, and then there was a gap until like the relaunch of Marvel with the new #1s and the whole Secret War stuff. And there was like this thing, but I do remember buying like Spider-Gwen #1 at Larry's shop in Lowell, and didn't he have a huge Hulk on the rooftop?
Oh yeah, he had that big Hulk up there.
Yeah, I remember that.
You drive by, you can see him.
That's just pretty funny. I just very rarely do I talk to people who've been to comic book shops in Lowell, Massachusetts. So this is a nice little trip down memory lane here. But
so when were you there?
I was there until 2016. So it's 06 to 16. I lived there for 10 years.
Chance we probably bumped into each other.
It's possible.
That was the time I was going there. Yeah.
Yeah. I lived like there's a River Place Towers was right next to the Asongas Arena. For anybody who's not from New England, they're all like, what the hell are you guys talking about?
Yeah,
but so I basically, hypothetically, I could have walked to Larry's from where I was living, but crossing over the bridge. It was right over the bridge. Right over the bridge into the other side of the Lowell where I was on, over by the Songas Center or Songas Arena, whatever the hell it's called now. But yeah, people like from California listen to this podcast, like, what the fuck are you guys talking about?
Put like one of those like timestamps on the thing, like just fast forward to this part and we'll get
don't worry about it. Unless you're not from New England, then don't worry about this this conversation we're having here. But you guys co-created Breath of Shadows, but you guys also did Sea of Sorrows and Road of Bones, and you talked a little bit about how you guys got together. But let me read quickly so we can get into Breath of Shadows a little bit here. I say quickly, but these solicitations are so long nowadays that does either one of you want to give, or Rich, you can do this. If you want to give a synopsis, like an elevator pitch of what Breath of Shadows is, so people can know about it.
Sure. So Breath of Shadows is the story of this guy, Jimmy Meadows, who's a rock star in the 1960s. And he's a little bit disillusioned. He's, his band, it's called The Shades, and they've had a bunch of hits, but, the culture is starting to move on. He doesn't really know how to connect. And he's just sort of feeling both blocked creatively, and also his life is a mess. Like, he's addicted to drugs and, just every rock star excess you can think of, like he's so he's getting a lot of pressure to get going on a new album. He can't get started, so his manager suggests that they take this kind of like spiritual journey to Mexico, like Central America. Like the Yucatan, which is kind of like the southern part of Mexico, in search of this, I guess you could call it like kind of like a magical elixir, which is supposed to like cure your addictions and free your mind. Like, it's very similar to ayahuasca, and like, which is like kind of pretty common today, but back then, was not as well known. So there were a lot of like kind of like wilder stories about like what it actually does and stuff like that. But the whole idea is that they're following in the footsteps of this kind of like famous counterculture author from the 50s that kind of disappeared down there. And there's this book called El Peruaca, which was sold as like sort of like a fictional book, but the true fans know that it's like a real story and stuff like that. So he's basically going down there to like in search of this drug where like nobody really knows where it is, or it's not like today. I think you could book like a route, like a weekend at like a 4-star resort, and like they have their own ayahuasca shaman who's going to kind of like take you through it. Like back then it was just like, well, I don't know, it's somewhere in the jungle. So they go down to the jungle and they hook up with this research team of archaeologists and scientists that are going out to study some newly discovered ruins. Kind of the deal is, well, we've got rock star money, your expedition needs money, but the catch is you got to bring us along. So everyone's really happy to be there. But anyway, so down in the jungle, they, issue 1 kind of like sets up a lot of this story, but, there's definitely like more going on down there than just some miracle drug that's going to cure him.
Yes, issue 1 gives you enough of a feel of what's like that there's more going on, but doesn't give too much away, which is one of those things that like, it makes you. One of those weird things in miniseries that I see is that like you have to get a lot into obviously a 5-issue series. So sometimes you can see some people's miniseries where like the first issue gives way too much away that you're just like, it still makes you want to read the future issues because you're like, okay, I know a lot. And then there's other ones who give you almost nothing.
Yeah.
that you're like, okay, why would I buy a second issue? I've actually had a couple issues that I read of a comic book recently that I read the first issue and it gave me absolutely nothing in the comic book, but so
Right.
little that I needed to now read the second issue just to see where they were going. Like it was almost like they tricked me into buying a second issue by not
Right.
giving me enough in the first issue. But where
Yeah.
Breath of Shadows gives you just enough, I feel like, and at the end it has that like that splash page or the last page, and you're like, okay, I want to continue
Yeah.
going with this. So that's actually
Yeah.
pretty cool.
I mean, it's all about kind of like finding that balance,
Yeah.
because it's like, when I think of like some of my favorite, like, books, but also like, let's say like horror movies that like, that inspire a lot of like the work. It's like, the monster doesn't show up for like the first, like, 45 minutes or whatever. It's more about like kind of getting to know who these characters are, which ones you wouldn't mind see getting like, skewered, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that's kind of really what it's about. But at the same time, it like can't be all set up. Like if it's all just set up, then it's like kind of falls flat. So it's just, for me, like writing it, it's all about trying to just strike that balance. Or like you said, it's like you're giving enough to make you as a reader want to come back for more, but without giving away the whole store up front.
Mm-hmm. And have either one of you seen Babylon yet? The movie with Margot Robbie?
Yeah.
Matt Damon. No. Okay. Well, I don't want to give too much away. I don't want to spoil for anybody either. But like that movie, just like all of a sudden, I know where like the first 15 minutes of the movie, like you're in the movie. Like they come out. They don't slowly. They just come out with a bang. You're like, what the hell am I watching? And I feel like you mentioned that balance, Rich. But like Alex, the artwork in the beginning of the book, you're just right in it. Like you're just like you're not even like holding back a little bit. How was it like drawing all that many centipede legs on?
Gross. No, I mean, I love it. It was I love that the first page is like, it's, we get right into it. There's no monkey around on this one. It's
Nope.
like panel like 4, like centipedes are puking out of his arms. Like that's all right. We're in it. Let's do it.
And for those who are like don't want to be too grossed out about bugs, it's not like the entire thing has these like grotesque bugs, but the first couple pages, you open that up. If you're like in the comic book shop and you open that up, you could be like, oh, I'm not reading this before I go to bed.
There's a couple bugs in this. Yeah. Well, there was I've said it before, I can't remember one of the issues. I told Rich, I'm like, dude, I'm gonna have to draw this like with my pants tucked into my socks, just because I'm gonna be something crawling in my pant leg. But
a little breeze comes in from the window. You're like, ah.
Like, oh god, jeez. But I mean, bugs, man. Drawing those suckers all about layering. Get one on top of the other time. Like, always make sure it looks like there's another centipede underneath that centipede, and they're gross.
I do this because I read most of my comic books before I go to bed, and I mentioned this before. Of like, there's I mean, horror style comic books aren't the same. Like what actually I would mention this before on the podcast too is horror comic books got me into horror movies. I actually wasn't a big horror movie fan until I started reading more horror comic books. And I don't know if it's because horror comic books have this, I don't know, ease to it. That if I get scared or gross, I can close the book. Whereas it's a lot harder to turn off a movie. You have to find the remote, things like that. Or if it's a jump scare, it's already over by the time you are scared about it. But there's something about that. And I said, but the problem is I read most of my comic books at night. And so a lot of these new horror comic books that I'm reading, I'm like reading right before bed. And then I'm like staring at the ceiling, like, oh my God, I can't sleep right now. And it's not that, like I said, it's not scary, but there's just like this feeling of unease that when he's, having this visions or whatever, it's just like this uneasiness.
Yeah. I mean, like in a movie, it's like you have a lot of tools to build tension that you don't in a comic, because it's like you do it with music, you could do it with the way the camera moves, you could do it with the lighting and things like that, whereas like in a comic it's really all just about the pacing and like the atmosphere and stuff like that, and so it's like it like kind of like has to, it kind of, when it works, it's like your mind kind of engages with it, and it's like your mind is kind of filling in the blanks, and it's like you're reading, and in your head you're kind of imagining that music, and you're your hairs are standing on end on the back of your neck and stuff like that. And a lot of it is just sort of like engaging your imagination and taking it to like a scary place. But yeah, I mean, like I love that's one of the things I love about horror comics is just that it's like it can really like give you this kind of like visceral, like emotional reaction that like you don't get out of like a lot of other stories, because I mean, like I can read a superhero story, I'm never going to know what it's like to fly under my own power. I'm
Yes.
never going to know what it's like to like have a bunch of bullets bounce off of me. But like I've been fucking scared before, I've been creeped out before, seen bugs and been like, ah, you know what I mean? So it's like, so it's just like very like relatable, even though it is like, supernatural, like weird stuff.
Sure.
Well,
Well, the thing I like with comics, especially compared to movies, there's no hiding. You can't mess around. Like a great example of that is there's a bit in the Watchmen movie compared to the comic where it's like you remember the scene is Rorschach is talking about he's like, what does this look like? And like in the panel in the comic, it shows like the dog with the head split, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like in the comic, it's there's no messing around. You know what you're looking at. You got all the time in the world to stop, look at this thing, analyze it. It's all freaking gross. But you watching the movie, they have to do like what does this look like? Blam! Like big like jump scare music. It's freaking dark. You're like, well, it's shiny, whatever it is. It's gooey. I don't know. And then it's gone.
Yeah.
Like, but that's the thing. So with comics, you just can't mess around because there's no like edit. You're not gonna look away. Like you need to whatever you're showing, it better be good because you can like the viewer can like park and like look at this thing and as long as they want to, and that's one of my favorite things about doing these things. Like, all right, like I'm not gonna put in a bunch of shadows. Like, who was like, no, let's look at it and let's get to know it.
And there's detail. I mean, you do a great job with the detail in it. So you're actually like as a comic book lover like myself and as an artist myself, I like to look at the detail of things. It's something that you don't get as much in a movie. You're not like no one's really pausing. I mean, people are pausing it, but usually that's when the typical person takes their top off in a horror movie is when someone pauses the movie. But in a horror comic book, it's that aspect of like, or a comic book in general, just you stare at it for a while and you get way more into it. And sometimes there's not speech bubbles on that page or less little number of lettering on that page. So you have to like kind of interpret what you're going on yourself in that sense of taking in a horror comic book. And like I said, that's what happened. I think what happened was I got to the point where I read as much horror comic books as I could. And then I'm like, well, I'm not reading right now. I'm watching TV. So maybe I should watch something that's horror. And then it got me into horror. And then it's horror comic books and actually these comic books that are based in real life with a slight fictional part of it, like one small element that makes this fictional has ruined me for superhero comic books, I think. Because it's like you mentioned, you can live in a somewhat world of Breath of Shadows, like you can live in this world, whereas let's be honest, there's no such thing as a flying superhero, like you mentioned, Rich. Like it's just you have to separate yourself. Okay, this is fake. Reading something like Breath of Shadows, like it gives you that uneasiness of like this could be real. Like this is not fake. This could be an actual thing that happened. This could be an actual based in a true story kind of thing. And that's the beauty of comic books, I think.
I'll tell you a funny story about Breath of Shadows because there's like a similar thing happened on Sea of Sorrows. So basically, when when we decided like, okay, like we're gonna be in the 60s, we're gonna be set in South America, Central American jungle. We're going to be, and centipedes are going to be the motif of the, the creepy shit going on.
Yes.
But I still wanted to do some research because, like, we're going into like Mayan ruins. I don't want to do anything to like disparage the Mayans or like I want to like honor the culture like as much as I can, being an outsider. So I did some research. Now, it turns out that in the 1960s, an oil prospecting team found some previously undiscovered Mayan ruins. So I'm like, oh, great. There we go. Like, it's kind of like a little historical hook, like a fun little fact. What are the ruins' names? What's the ruins' name? It's called El Peruhuaca, which is the name we lifted like and put in the
Yeah.
book.
Mm-hmm.
Now, keep in mind, I had no idea this was even a thing when all this stuff was in place. I look up, what does El Peruaca mean? Roughly translated, the centipede water. It's like a place. There was like a Mayan dynasty, and the way the Mayan dynasties identify themselves was with the glyphs. And there was like, there was like a snake dynasty and a leopard dynasty, and there was a centipede dynasty. And this city was the home of the centipede dynasty, and it was near water, so what they refer to as the centipede water. And it's just like you can't make it up. And it's just like, okay, well, some weird like synchronicity. So maybe it is true. I don't know.
You're just really good at your job. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Speaking of that and the research, was this an idea that you had, Rich, and you partnered with? You guys come up with this together? Was this we want to do this book together? Like, obviously, you guys have done a number of books together, and obviously, this sounds like a good job for you two to do together. But where did this originate?
Yeah, my contribution to this was, I think, I was like, Rich, I want to draw something in the jungle. And Rich said, all right. But yeah, I mean, the whole story, I think it's all Rich, right?
But you contribute stuff. It's like, I think like what it is I kind of like do the skeleton of the story, like, here's the premise, here's what's going to happen, here's how it's going to play out, and then like, I send that to Alex, and Alex, you give me your opinion, you start like sketching stuff, and then the sketches kind of inspire me to like flesh it out more, and like and definitely like use it as like, many times I'll be like, Alex, what do you think of this? Or does this sound cool? Do you feel like drawing this? And then there's also times where like I'll have something in the script, and Alex will send me a page and be like, hey, like, I know it said this, but what do you think about this? It's like slightly different, and it's always better than what I originally intended. Yeah. So but yeah, like the way this like kind of came about was we did Road to Bones, and we really liked it, and IDW was like, hey, like we'd love to do more series with you guys. What do you have? And I think we probably could have very easily pitched them Road of Bones 2, like kind of pick up where that left off or something, but we didn't really want to do that because we liked it a lot, and it was kind of felt like a really self-contained story to us. So we were like, okay, let's tell a story that's kind of like in the same vein, like the same vibe, but with different time period, different characters, different everything. And when we were working on Road of Bones, Alex was saying that like he was really psyched to be drawing something in the snow, because living in Vermont, he's like looking at it every day. So he, his reference, he just looked out his window, and he said like, I also want to do a book set on the ocean, and I want to do a book set in the jungle. So I was like, all right, and this was like before anything. So I just sort of like put it in my mental Rolodex or whatever. And then when we were doing Sea of Sorrows, that was like our ocean book. And then it was like, okay, jungle book, so that it was like, sort of like, okay, well, there's only so many jungles on the planet. Like, which one would I like set it in? And when we settled on doing something in the 60s, it was like, well, we could do a Vietnam thing, but a lot of people have done like Vietnam stuff, even in horror, and, what's like something we haven't seen before. And Breath of Shadows, like, even though it has like kind of like there are books that kind of inspired it and led to, like there's a lot of like, I think like the journey itself, like being in the jungle and like going to this, like, there's a lot of like Heart of Darkness in there, but at the same time, we're just trying to do it in our own way.
Well, I think I was just wondering whether or not the IDW marketing team was like, well, it's very easy for us to promote this now because you guys have done 2 books together already. We'll just say from the all-star team.
Yeah.
So the other thing you guys have now done is you guys have pigeonholed yourself into books that are 3 words long and are of in the middle of it. Yes. So now the next one has to be that, or you need to go the other route and go the whole Jason Aaron side and do like a entire sentence just to get away from the 3 words. Like do a I think Jason Aaron was going for the longest book title with Once Upon a Time at the End of the World in 2022, 23. I mean, or 22. He was trying to get the longest, right?
Matt Rosenberg has some pretty long ones too. He's got like
is it
Furthest Place from Here, and
Yeah.
You Can Never Go Home.
Yeah.
Like,
So the 3 words is perfect. I mean, I do my other job is doing a creative director for a brewery. So I have to fit when we do beer cans and they come up with these long names. I'm like, you guys realize you want all these words on the front of a can. And one of them is like 10 letters long. It's going to be so tiny to be on the front of that can in a creative way. And so when if they were to come up to me and be like, Road of Bones, Sea of Sorrows, or Breath of Shadows, I'm like, sweet, perfect. That works absolutely great for a beer can design.
I think those would all make awesome beer names. It's just
see, there you go. But that's funny. It's just like look at it. I'm like, it makes sense because it's very easy for anybody. You could market this as we're talking to Alex and Rich of these 3 titles, and a lot of times when you have 2 creators on, it's like, well, this creator is these 6 things, and this creator is these 3 things, and they've never worked together. This is cool to see that you guys are. And like I said, now you guys just have to be a partnership forever, and Justin Birch too, like obviously with lettering. So
Justin's amazing, and he really brings a lot to the books. Like especially I think you'll see that a lot in Breath of Shadows, but especially in Sea of Sorrows, where there was a lot of like blackness on the page and like underwater, and it's like kind of like just like in real life, like when you're diving like that, it's very easy to kind of get disoriented. And the same thing like with the visuals, it's potentially easy to get disoriented, but he did an amazing job of like kind of guiding you through the story. But yeah, I mean, like basically like with the blank of blank, like kind of like the vague idea we had was that, these 3 can kind of like hang together as a trilogy almost, like the same way, like, like American Horror Story, or like, it's almost like an, anthology series, but we don't have like a catchy overall name for it. So I guess we'll just call
it'd be great for IDW in the future to put these 3 together as like a box of the 3 trades in one box. It'd be kind of cool too. But
well, that would be awesome, and hopefully we'll be able to do that at some point once Breath of Shadows is out there, like in collected form and stuff. Like we're definitely on our list of things to talk with IDW about down the road.
Hardcover, that'd be nice.
Exactly. Right, there you go. The funny thing about Justin Birch is this is totally unplanned, but I recorded 2 podcasts today, and he was on the second podcast today, Justin Birch, and it wasn't planned this way. And it's you this episode, and then literally the next week's episode is Justin. And I thought about it afterwards. I'm like, I should have just texted Justin and been like, can you just come on this episode?
Oh yeah,
it would have been great.
Have him like waiting in the wings, like
it's just kind of funny. I'm like, exactly. It was funny. I'm like looking at the schedule, and I'm like, oh, and then I was like looking at things, and I saw the word Birch in the front of it. I'm like, I was researching some of the books that he's obviously lettered, and I was like, it's not even as like funny as like maybe I recorded like last night, or it's literally today. I talked to you guys, and then like a couple hours later, I talked to Justin, and it's just kind of funny on that sense that I just wanted to talk to a letterer, and I'm like, what a talented letterer this guy is. And then it was like, oh my gosh, this is kind of funny. We'll just match the 2 episodes together, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like I'm asking Justin questions now.
Double feature, right?
Yes, exactly. But yeah, it was kind of funny to see that. He's excellent, obviously excellent letterer. And that's something that I feel like I'm going to sound like a broken record for people who listen to this podcast, but not enough people get credit for that. It's like the complete book is not the same without all of the people working in it, and letterers sometimes get pushed off to the side a little bit. I'm glad his name is on the front of your book.
Lettering was one of those, like I tried that early on in my career. I'm like, oh, it's letters, whatever. And then doing it, I'm like, oh, this is freaking hard. And I got the book back, and it's like, oh yeah, it looks great, but who's your letterer? This is garbage. I'm like, oh, that's me. But yeah, I mean, it's no joke. I mean, it's and that's what everybody's looking at too. When you flip through a book, it's a guaranteed if you're reading a book, you're reading that lettering, so it better be good. And Justin, he kills it every time.
It obviously makes sense because I mean, if you guys have these 3 books together, obviously Justin knows your style of artwork and your style of writing, and so it makes it a little bit easier on his end to be like, okay, I've already done this before, I can now do it again. And that's something I see a lot of times too. If someone sticks the same letterer over and over again, it's kind of like, okay, we get that style, we know what you want. Like he almost, like I would guess that his first trial at Road of Bones would have been do you guys like this? And then now in Breath of Shadows, it's more
Yeah.
along the lines of like, well, I know they're gonna like this because they liked it on the other ones, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
the same thing with
And
artwork, and I'm guessing the same thing with artwork.
yeah, and I mean the funny thing with Justin's lettering, it's like, you know, because we'll get like drafts, you know, like a proof back that we have to like review and stuff, and it's like 99.9% of like things that we have to change is like things like I fucked up in the script, like, you know, oh, there should be an apostrophe here, or there, like, you know, this should be like a quotation mark, or you know, like this is misspelled or whatever. Like, it's never like oh dude, you know, this balloon's in the wrong place, or you know. So yeah, he's amazing, like and it's like, you know, it should be obvious because I like, you know, doing multiple books with Alex. I do multiple books with my other friend, my artist friend Joe Mulvey. It's like when I start working with people that, like, you know, I like working with and do a great job, it's like, you know, I see no reason to change that up. It's like,
Yes.
you know,
Well, it's fun. Like I mentioned, I talked to TC Hopkins a couple weeks ago too, and talking as a letterer, it's like I like the idea of being able to, if I was getting myself into the comic book industry, one of the benefits of being a letterer is you get to work with so many different creators, in the sense that now you get that ability. But in the same sense, like it might be nice as a writer or as an artist to partner with another person, because you get that ability to do it with someone else. But also, if you have a good relationship with each other and you know each other very well, and your artwork and writing styles mesh well, then why wouldn't you just go back to the well and continue?
I think it's like you want to kind of mix it up. It's like, yeah, you know, like some projects you want to work with new people because you want to, you know, you want to like kind of broaden like who you work with and who you know, and also just like try out different styles. You know, you don't want to like stagnate, or like, you know, kind of have it feel like you're doing the same old thing. But it's like, yeah, at the same time, it's like if I had like an emergency, like on a book, like let's say we had a letterer, and you know, he's off in South America on a cocaine binge, and we can't get a hold of him. The deadline.
He's doing the whole Breath of Shadows thing.
Yeah, he's doing the Breath of Shadows thing. So, but the book is due Monday. Like, I know I could call Justin, and like if there was any like possible way for him to do it, he would do it, and he would do it well. So it's like, you know, it's like somebody who's reliable, and somebody, you know, who's very talented and can reliably bring that talent at like the drop of a hat, is like, you know, that's like somebody you hold on to and somebody you work with as much as you can.
It's really cool. But so obviously you guys have worked on 3 projects, like I mentioned, together. You 3 technically. What makes Breath of Shadows different than the other 2 projects, if you say that? Like, obviously you mentioned there's obviously a different story, but like what sets it apart? What should people do to read this book if they're fans of the other 2 books?
Well, you know, Rotobones, like overall, was like very white, and Sea of Sorrows is very black. This is like psychedelic, so we used all the colors that we didn't use. No, I'm just kidding. But you know,
I mean, that's not wrong.
Yeah,
like, it's not a wrong answer, but
true.
Yeah.
That's that's the quote in the back, like in the front of the book, and it just tells people why you should pick this up. It's different because this one actually has color in it.
I think like if you were with us for what we were talking about in Rotobones and Sea of Sorrows, and if you kind of are able to see the connections between those 2 books, whereas like, you know, they're both very different stories, but they're both kind of talking about something going on with like the human condition, like as far as like, you know, what people are capable of when pushed into desperate situations, and sort of like the horrific things that might exist in our imaginations or supernaturally, versus the horrors that we're all very capable of doing without any kind of assistance. I think if you were on board with all that and find that interesting, this is kind of the book that, like, if it was like an essay about that stuff, this is where we get to the conclusion, you know, and like really kind of like what we've been building up to as far as like what we're trying to say with this work. So it's like, they're all different stories, but they all do have connections and hang together. So I think if you found what we were doing in Road of Bones and Sea of Sorrows interesting, I think you'll find this book even more interesting.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So first issue dropped February 1st, but the funny thing is this actually, we're recording this on the 20th, but it's actually coming out, this episode will drop on the 27th, and then Justin's episode will drop on the 1st. So that's actually perfect, right? Because that's the week of issue 2 coming out. I'm guessing we had some wild stuff and some crazy imagery and stuff like that in issue 1. I'm guessing it's just going to get crazier from here. Is that true?
Yeah, we don't pull back. And it's like it's weird. Like every issue just kind of like escalates in more and different ways, and like we do it's like we kind of return to like a few different like motifs where like just as far as like the centipedes and how they interact and like what they do with people, and but I know Alex worked really hard to like make each of those moments look kind of unique and more like
there's a bit in the issue 2 that I remember is like, well, like there's a bit like this kind of like in issue 1, and I'm like, well, I got to top that one, and then the next one I'm like, oh, I got to top that one and top this one, and like there's yeah, it's
well, I guess that's kind of the benefit too of a 5-issue miniseries in that sense too, is where it's like some people might say, well, you have to fit a lot of story into 5 issues, but also I feel like it also gives the ability to just come out swinging and do whatever all you want to do, and know that you don't have to save anything for issue 10 or issue 15 or so on to try to get it. You can get it all in this 5-issue series and just be like, home run, there we go, all done. And I like that. I think that 5 miniseries nowadays are the big thing. Like if you just look around, there's very rarely, in all honesty, I don't know how much longer outside of the big 2 we're going to see ongoings to continue off. There's only a few ones that I think Todd McFarlane will just do Spawn until he dies. I don't know if that's ever going to.
Well, that's because Todd McFarlane is like a multimillionaire, so he could
he can do it.
He can sell a $2.99 Image comic book. It's still $2.99. It's the only one actually, because Saga just went up. Saga was $2.99 when they came back out, but now it's $3.99 again too.
Yeah.
So
I mean like it's funny because like the reason why miniseries are really prevalent is because it's like it really is kind of like a lot about money, because comics are expensive to put out. Like we all have to get paid to make it worthwhile, and then also it costs money to print them, it costs money to market them and everything. So it's like a miniseries is like an easier commitment for like everybody, you know what I mean? Like even like Alex, like if someone comes to you like for a miniseries, it's like that's going to be like about like a year of your time, and it's like you'd be like, okay, like I'll be tied up for a year with this. It's like with like an ongoing, it's like, oh well, maybe like the next like 3 years, and like you're not really sure about year 2 or 3, so it might be harder for you to commit. And for like a publisher, it's like if the sales are going to tank or like whatever, and they know like if the sales don't go great, and they're on the hook for like, they'd rather be on the hook for like 3 more issues than they would be for like 10 or 15 more issues. So I think it's just kind of like miniseries are naturally where like everything works for the creative team and the publisher, but it also works for readers because it's like kind of like a self-contained story. So I kind of see the industry going more towards like the Hellboy model, where it's like a series of miniseries that it's like a progression, but each one is kind of like its own like little self-contained thing.
And I can also see that if you took characters from your series and even did spin-offs with them and did miniseries, that all makes sense. Like you mentioned the Hellboy model, Barbaric does that with their different things. There's just different ways that you can make this happen. And I feel like me as a comic book buyer, you can go in there and say, oh, this is 1 of 5. I can commit to 5 issues. But 1 of 27 or 1 of 30, it's one of those things that like, do I want to even buy issue 1? Because if I like it, I have to buy 30 issues. kind of
And then
weird thing. It's
then
a
you're thinking
commitment.
like, should I just wait for the trade, or should I just get the collection when it's out? And
Mm-hmm.
that's
And
that's
so
also nice to feel like. I think a lot of people just like to know, like, all right, this is going somewhere. Like,
yeah,
there's going to be a conclusion, and like opposed to like,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
it can go
another
on
thing.
for yeah.
Like,
I want to know we're working up to something.
yeah, and you know that you, as like I said, a writer, as an artist, you know you have that ending that you can plan to. I just listened to a podcast with Kyle Starks talking about I Hate This Place, and that his was supposed to be an ongoing or at least 15 issues, and I guess that Skybound's making it 10. And so now what he had for those last 5 issues, he has to kind of like try to either cut it out or like cram it in on the 5 issues. And so, like, knowing that it's a 5-issue miniseries, like I mentioned with the whole, like, just go out swinging, is you can do everything you want to do in 5 issues. And if you have more story to tell, you know, Breath of Shadows, something else. And there you go. As a second volume to it, you can go on a different direction. So I'm a big fan of miniseries.
Yeah. And another thing is that, like, also just like, you know, as far as like doing the series and stuff, it's like we're almost done, like in terms of like our end of it. Like, you know, it's all written. Alex is working on the last issue. As soon as he's done, it's going to go to Justin. So it's like, you know, it's going to come out, and like, you know, that, like as a buyer and a reader, it's like, you know that it's going to happen, and you're going to get the whole thing. There's not going to be any delays, unless, I mean, like, obviously there might be like a shipping delay or shipping delay or something like that, but it's not going to be because, like, you know,
I don't go on a cocaine binge in South America.
Yeah.
Well, you did, but you already finished all your books, so you don't.
That's how you draw it so fast.
Yeah, we IDW made us put that in the contract. No cocaine binges.
No.
Until...
This is not based on a true story, right? Like, you guys.
No.
That's pretty funny. Like, well, it's true. Like I said, that you have an ending. It's like, how many times do we get pissed off at a TV show getting canceled on a cliffhanger at the end of the season and expecting a second season and not getting it? And I feel like they're starting to, and even comic book creators are starting to, if they are doing that, not writing himself into a hole where, like, okay, this is a self-contained every 5 issues, and, you know, with the trades and all that stuff coming out, it's like 5 issues is no one. IDW is not coming to you guys after 2 issues and be like, okay, we're not going to finish this. Like, they're going to at least go to 5 and get you guys that commitment. And so that's a benefit too. Whereas, you know, someone can go 3 issues and 4 issues and be like, oh, we're done. And now you don't know where the hell, you know, someone's stuck in the middle of the woods and you don't know how they get out of there. Did they get saved? I don't know.
It is a horror story, so probably not.
But yeah, and I'm telling you right now, IDW has been putting out some stellar creator-owned or creator-driven art or pieces of artwork and comic books nowadays, with a bunch of different stuff coming out, and having Breath of Shadows be in that collection of different books that are coming out right now is stellar. And I forget which one I was reading recently, that the back page was an advertisement for your book. So it's like they're even piggybacking into the next one, being like, well, if you like this creator driven thing or whatever, then here's this one. And so that's pretty cool in that sense too.
You know, they really kind of brought it, like last year, this year, like, you know, they launched like an entire, you know, IDW Originals. It's like it's like its own full-blown imprint under there with a lot of like amazing creators. I don't think there's like one book in the opening slate like that have been like, oh, that you know, I'm not interested in. They all have like something really cool. And like on the company side of it, Mark Doyle, who runs the whole thing, has been amazing and super supportive. And like, hopefully we're definitely hoping to do more with them down the line. And it's, you know, just a great place to be, like as a creator, just to know that, like, you know, the company that you're working with has got your back, and that they're, you know, like a good place to be, because it's not like that at every publisher. Like, there's some that are just, you know, like, you know, people are like fighting and like involved in lawsuits with them and stuff like that. So you know, it's definitely a good place.
It's nice to see, because I mean, as a company that had a lot of intellectual property connection to them and licensed stuff, that it gives IDW almost a new boost in sales or you know, fandom, in the idea that now it's considered in those realms, most of the other publishers that are doing a lot of creator-owned stuff. So these IDW Originals have been great, and I hope they started off with a bang, and continuing on would be great too. So like I said, you guys are in that first part that, like you mentioned, I don't think there's been one that's been like, they've all been pretty good. So it's pretty cool to see that. So are you guys going to work together again on another thing? Or is this, I mean, is this
yeah. No,
you
no.
guys hate each other now.
No, we have,
Yeah,
we have stuff in the pipeline, and,
Nice.
and you know, as I will work with Alex for as long as he can tolerate me. It's always a pleasure. So
It was funny. Who was like, I was talking a couple of weeks ago with someone, and they said, it sucks because I have to say, I can't. It sucks. I hate to say the words. I can't say it right now because of whatever. And I'm like, but that's a good thing. If you can say everything that you're doing right now, it means that you don't have anything that's coming up in the future.
Right.
You're like, everything you know about me is out there right now. So you have no work in it. If you say I can't say anything about that right now, it means that you've got some cool things coming up that you're working on. So that's a good thing. If you guys have stuff in the hopper that's not actually announced or created yet, it's cool. I'm excited for it too, because you guys have had 3 for 3 on my opinion on these 3 books, and continuing it would be great. So anything else you guys want to chat about quickly before we wrap this thing up? No,
I mean, like I have, if you are out at the comic shop and looking to buy books with my name on them, I'm also working on the Magic the Gathering book right now. Believe issue 24 will be out soon, and then we have issue 25 following that. So
like,
if you're a fan,
like a startup company, Marvel, something like that.
Yeah, that's true too. If you're you have Marvel Unlimited, I've been doing some work there digitally. Like if you just saw Quantumania and you're need a little Kang refresher, I just did a comic on Marvel Unlimited called Who is Kang? That'll kind of give you the rundown Cliff Notes version of his history, because let me tell you, it is a complicated history. I read like something like 50 years worth of like books as like research, and some of it is just like, all right, well, let's not talk about that part. But we'll talk about this part, but I had a great time writing it. I love Kang as a character, and it was super fun to write. So if you have the app, check it out. It's one of the Infinite Scroll comics. And I have a couple on there. So
it's funny too, because I watched Quantumania on Thursday, and it's one of those characters, like I went with my wife, and it's one of those characters that books like Who is Kang and things like that are definitely, I think, good for people to read. You can read it afterwards too. You can see Quantumania and then go, okay, then get the kind of the idea of who he is afterwards. And obviously, even what you wrote for Marvel is likely not going to be the same exact thing we get in the MCU. However, it gives you an idea of what they're basing it off of, and that's exciting, because sometimes I sometimes need that refresher to understand what the hell is going on, the number of the years that Marvel's been around and things like that. So
it's like
things are always great.
Like the thing with Kang, it's like, think about how complicated the Marvel universe is, and then throw in time travel. And like,
time travel alone is complicated. So adding in the fact that complication of Kang the Conqueror is pretty insane. I don't want to give anything away for anybody who hasn't seen the movie. It was an entertaining movie, and I'm excited to see Jonathan Majors play Kang, because I think he did an excellent job as the Conqueror, as I said multiple times in the movie. So awesome. And anything else for you, Alex? I mean, I know you're working hard on this last issue of Breath of Shadows, but anything else out?
So Breath of Shadows, also doing Sync, jumping back in Sync again with our friend John Lees. And I know they're doing like a whole like a Kickstarter thing with Comic Drive and all that. Along with that, what do I got coming out? I'm trying to think of. There's a couple things I'm like, I think I can talk about that, and I'm not sure.
Well, don't risk it. But, I hate that stuff.
Well, so I gotta Sync's back out. Breath of Shadows. And this is gonna be a whole bunch of stuff that's like coming out later.
So when I record with Justin later today, do you want me to say that you guys crapped all over him?
Yeah. Just be like
subpar.
Call him Jonathan.
Yes, exactly. Or his website's J Justin Birch. So just you went Justin is his name. So he
Mhm.
stuttered over it first. Justin. But yeah, awesome. I really appreciate you two joining me and talking about Breath of Shadows and a bunch of other stuff. So pick up that issue. One should be, hopefully it's sold out of your LCS, but you know, if not, grab it at your LCS and then grab issue 2 on March 1st, and there'll be 5 issues. And I'm guessing the plan is to put it into a trade sometime this summer, fall, winter.
Yeah, most likely.
Yeah, you know how it is after the last issue comes out. But
Mhm.
again, thank you guys so much for coming on and taking the time. Good luck with the rest of you guys' endeavors,
Thanks for
and
having
I
us.
hope to talk to you guys again at some point in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, man.